Hey, sweet mama. Welcome back to another episode of Mom in Process. I'm your host and creator, Amy Cawthron. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's Thursday, which means we have another interview episode. And my guest today is Julie Hatch. She is phenomenal. I absolutely loved this conversation with her. What we talk about is everything to do with holistic parenting. I know we've talked about holistic health in the past, and we're going to continue to dive into that a little bit more in future episodes. But in today's topic and in today's conversation I have with Julie, we dive into holistic approaches in parenting. And I know that this isn't a parenting podcast, but my goal behind having a few of these conversations around parenting is to give you the tools and the resources so that you can be better equipped in your role as a full-time mom at home. So you can approach these situations with your children, you can approach these situations with yourself even, better equipped, more confident, and that helps you in your value, in your self-worth, because we're always working on, continued education, personal development. And I just feel like continued education may not be this formal idea of sitting down at college and taking a course. It may just be absorbing information, trying to do better, trying to understand better. So what Julie and I dive into in this conversation is a mix between Western medicine and Eastern medicine. So Julie is a pediatric nurse practitioner. She's an acupuncturist, and a holistic health expert, holistic child health expert. So even though her background was in pediatrics, she decided, and she talks about that in the episode, that one of the best ways to reach the children is actually through the parents, which is what we're doing here at Mom in Process. We understand that in order to raise this future generation, we have to first work on ourselves. So Julie started to recognize this, and she understood that, well, in order to help the kids, I actually have to help the parents. So she started her coaching program and her coaching business as a way to help stressed out, overly anxious parents who are then creating stressed out, overly anxious kids. And we talk about this goes very deep into our paradigms and our social conditioning. And, we are just trying to do our best, but we are parenting in the way that we were parented. And that's not always the best approach. And a lot of us are starting to recognize that and realize that, but we don't know other ways. We don't know any other way to approach this. How do we handle behavioral issues with our children? How do we handle parenting issues with our children? So, Julie and I, we talk about this, we dive into this, and we talk about motherhood and parenting and, even just behavioral issues with our parents. And then we also talk about her new book that's coming out. And I really encourage you to also check out Julie's podcast, Moms on a Mission, where she talks about holistic parenting. She has guests on that talk about these different parenting approaches as well. So grab a cozy beverage and join Julie and I in this conversational journey. Hi, Julie. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Hi, Amy. Well, thank you for having me here. This is fun.
Yes, this is actually, for my listeners, this is actually the second conversation that Julie and I have had, which is really exciting. She had me on her show and I loved my conversation so much that I wanted her to come on this show and talk to everybody about her knowledge and experience. So what we're going to talk about today is holistic parenting, what that means, what that entails, how it applies to us in this community. And just, I'm hoping, Julie, we can have some tips and some takeaway and really just some knowledge about what this entails, especially for those of us who have never really heard about this term before, and we've never really applied this in our own lives. I think what we're going to find is we're naturally doing some of this in our own lives, but maybe we don't fully understand it. And I'm hoping that we can, if we understand what it is, then we can lean into it a little bit more. So before we dive into it completely, can you take a minute and introduce yourself to the audience and a little bit about your background and how you came to be this beautiful holistic parenting coach?
Yes, thanks, Amy. I will try to condense it, make it concise and Julie Hatch. I am, for many, many, many years of my life, I've been a pediatric nurse practitioner and a neonatal nurse practitioner. So I've worked in Western medicine, always in intensive care. Well, sometimes in primary care, but in intensive care. And then 15 years ago, maybe, I did a medical mission trip to Brazil. And that is where I had a big turnaround, and I became introduced to and confronted with and familiar with alternative medicine.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other ways to do medicine than drugs and surgery like Western medicine. Down in Brazil, that's not what they do. So I came back and I pursued other forms of holistic health and tried a bunch of different things, landed on acupuncture. So I went to acupuncture school, which is a big undertaking. And so it's traditional Chinese medicine that I've been focusing on. And then I took the traditional Chinese medicine, everything that I learned from that and from Western medicine, but really from Chinese medicine, and started my parent coaching business, because a lot of the basis from what I coach and teach and talk about really comes from traditional Chinese medicine, which is rich with thousands of years of experience and wisdom and knowledge. And it just goes a lot deeper than Western medicine does, and how we treat medicine, health medicine, and emotional medicine in raising our kids, like Western medicine does. So that's where I'm at now. I was a blend of all those things have come together, and they fit really well together. There's something to be said for both sides, certainly.
Yeah. And you're coming at this with experience as a mom. You have 3 boys as well, grown boys, right? They're grown out of the house. So you're coming in their 20s. Yeah. So you're coming at this not only from, Western medicine as a pediatric nurse practitioner, but also you have this Eastern medicine training now and this background, but also as a mother. So it's very like hands-on, real life, realistic approach. So if you started this 15 years ago, were you able to start applying this within your own household as a mother?
I was, and probably as similar to what you had alluded to before, I had been doing it. It was sort of my nature to be a more holistic kind of a person, the way that I perceive. So yes, I did. I was just more conscious of what I was doing once I had gone to school about it. And still, even though they're out of the house, they still are my kids, and they still come to me, and we still have interactions and times together. And I still, this is still applicable no matter what. They're the oldest one's 30. So we'll see how long this lasts, how long you can apply it. I think probably forever. And then they're going to be grandkids, perhaps.
Right. Do you think that your sons, do you think that they've learned enough from it and they've kind of grown up around it, that do you surmise, or could you predict that maybe they're going to use this in their own parenting if they choose to have children someday?
That's a good question. I will certainly highly encourage it. I think so. I think that it certainly is rubbed off on them, and that's often how we parent our children, is how we were parented. So I hope that I do think that a lot of what I did rubbed off on them, and whether or not they're aware of it being holistic or Eastern medicine or anything else, I don't know if if they'll identify it as that, but I think that it'll rub off on them, and they will do similarly for their kids.
I would think so. I mean, I think that would happen pretty naturally and organically. So can we dive into, before we get too deep into, your background and how you apply this, but can you talk to us about what holistic parenting is? Can you kind of define that for us and create a picture for that?
Sure, I'll try. Holistic, and I'm going to repeatedly be referring back to traditional Chinese medicine or Eastern culture, is body, mind, and soul, I guess. So it's not just, in traditional Chinese medicine, we don't just treat the body. We don't just say, oh, this part of the body is sick, the lungs are sick, we need to give them this medicine, and that's it. No, it's all incorporated. What's going on in the head, what's going on in the heart is incorporated into what's going on in the body. So in parenting, when you have a child in front of you that is either misbehaving, or you're wondering what this child needs or what you should be doing as a parent, it incorporates everything, the child's mind, emotions, heart, and their body as well.
Okay.
That's sort of
So,
holistic in a nutshell.
okay. So how do you apply that then as a parent? I mean, I know that's like a really big question and it's probably not like black and white answer, but what are your suggestions on how we apply that mentality in parenting?
Well, I start, and when I work with parents, with connecting with your child, really understanding your child. And I think the mothers say, of course, I know my child. I know what they're all about. And of course we do.
Mhm.
But I take it a step further and say to get to know what your child's element type is, which
Mm,
means what is their inner essence? What is their true nature? Um, and the element types, again, come from Chinese medicine, are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And every child falls under one of those categories. And once you can figure out that category that your child falls under, that narrows down a whole lot of what motivates your child and what stresses your child out. And so you obviously want to feed the motivators and stay away from the stressors and the things that cause them problems.
mhm,
So it really begins with just connecting and really understanding what drives your child, what is making them, it's their true nature, and it's how they interact with the world around them, why they say what they say, why they do what they do. It's where everything comes from, is this inner essence. It's just them. They're born with it. It's their inner core.
mhm.
And so if you can connect with that and understand it and honor it and nourish it, it does wonders for a child and for a mom-child relationship.
Mhm. Yeah, and as you're kind of explaining that, I'm sitting here thinking, I know stay-at-home moms, the kind of the perception for stay-at-home moms is like we're around our kids all the time and we should really know our child. But I'm going to be really honest in saying, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, like you could be home with your kids all the time and still not really know who they are because
Mhm.
you haven't really taken the time to connect with them. We're busy checking the boxes, working on the to-do list, just doing the things that we feel like we need to be doing.
So true.
And we're not actually taking the time to connect with them. And I've talked about that in other podcast episodes too. So what brought you to wanting to help parents in this specific area to start coaching parenting using this holistic approach?
My first desire was to help kids.
Oh, okay.
My passion is kids. I'm a pediatric nurse,
Mm-hmm.
but to get to the kids, you really need to go through the parents, because the parents are the ones that are raising the kids, and they're the ones that have the influence.
Mm,
So there are, and I actually put this in the trailer of my podcast, but there are three reasons why I wanted to do this. And one is that, and I'm sort of thinking about stay-at-home moms. Stay-at-home moms can really benefit from this because, well, everybody can. Parents are really stressed. Parents don't know what to do so much anymore. They have advice from friends and in-laws and the internet, and they don't always necessarily know what to do. And they're stressed about it. And they're stressed about, having to raise their kids. And then their kids are stressed and anxious. And sometimes it's a feedback loop that the child is stressed because the parents are stressed. So anyways, parents are stressed. Kids are super stressed and anxious these days. And so the third thing is that I think that we are, as parents, we're doing the best that we can. We're doing a great job. We're doing really the best that we can.
mm-hmm.
But that there's something that we're missing. We're providing them with the birthday parties,
Mm-hmm.
the equipment for sports, the violin lessons. We're giving all of them what they need: their clothes, the food, the shelter, all of that physical stuff. But there's something in here that we are not always connecting with in our kids. And my goal is to help parents connect with their kids on this. I'm doing this like the heart level, the soul level,
Mm-hmm.
and for all parents. But I think I won't, I don't know whether it's for stay-at-home moms or not, but when you do that, it really makes parenting a whole lot easier. You don't have to try to figure out, am I doing this wrong? You just, if it's you got a heart connection with your child and you really understand where they're coming from, it makes it really a lot easier.
Right. And so it makes you, I'm just kind of surmising, when you have something to lean onto and fall back onto. It helps you as a mom feel, I don't want to use the word control, but it feels like you have something to kind of grasp onto because, you know, you were laughing earlier about the birthday party because you and I were talking about that. And it's so true. It's like we've made the birthday cake, we've bought the balloons, we've done the birthday party thing, and we've done all these checking the boxes of making sure that they have what they need. But have we forgotten, like you said, the connection part of it and that soul, that deeper meaning part of it? And so what could you give us an example, I guess, of when you're in your coaching and I know you can't really share with us any names or anything like that, but could you give us a scenario of a situation, like a parenting situation that you've walked through with somebody where they've kind of used this holistic approach to better understand their child, or maybe work through an issue that they were having? I would just love to see or hear of an example of this in action.
Yeah, I will give you in a second, I will give you a real example of who I worked with, but also beforehand, as a general example, you can have, we all know that parenting is not a one size fits all. Every child is different, which is the premise of holistic parenting, is every child is different. So you may have, say that you have a son, no, say that there are 3 boys on the playground and they're getting bullied by kids from 2 grades higher. And the bullies are here and you got 3 kids and you got 1 kid who decides to run away and just not deal with it. You have another kid who stands up to the bullies and wants to fight and has this vim and vigor, I'm going to fight. And then you have a third one who decides to use humor to diffuse the situation. And the situation gets diffused. So it's different ways that kids, you can have one situation and 3 different kids are going to handle it differently. And it's important to know where your child falls into what might happen if they get approached by a bully. So that's sort of a general kind of a thing. I did work with a girl who was in 8th grade, and this is going to relate to the element types, but I'll try to explain it. She was really artistic. She was a very soft-spoken, shy. I don't know if I would use the word withdrawn. She enjoyed her 2 or 3 good friends, but she really enjoyed time by herself. She was an amazing artist. She didn't give herself enough credit, but she would love to go home after school and be in her room and create and draw. And her mother thought that she was depressed because she liked to be alone so much and only had a couple of friends. But the mother was a fire element, and she was all about, she had a great, huge social life, and she loved to be out and having friends and doing this and doing that. So the 8th grade dance was coming up, and the mother thought that the daughter should go because the mother would have been out there going to the 8th grade dance as an 8th grader. And so the girls said, okay, I'll go, Mom, because you want me to. And they went and bought some kind of an outfit. And it was really, she had a terrible time because it was the mother's desire to have her, it was a mother's agenda to have the daughter go to the dance. And the daughter knew that she didn't really want to go. She did, and it was really not a very good time. So the point of that is that if the mom had realized the daughter's element type, that she was a water type, and she's introvert, she's not extrovert like her mother. And so if she had realized that and not pushed her to go, and there are other things that came along also, but to understand where your child is coming from, which is usually not where you're coming from, or sometimes, it really helps the child to live the life that they are comfortable living.
Goodness, isn't that so true that we, for some reason, and I don't even think that we realize that we do it, but we want our kids, or we treat our kids as if they are us, as if they're, because they came from us, so they're going to be extroverted or they're going to be introverted, how we are. We expect them, not in any kind of a bad way. I don't think a lot of the times we even do it intentionally, but we expect them to kind of be interested in the things that we're interested in, or do the things that we do, or be the way that we are. And it's just not like that. You can raise them and you can parent them, but they're still their own person. So I mean,
Yep.
honestly, as a mom of 3 girls, it starts to be really overwhelming because now you have to really fully understand each individual child, and then, approach your parenting and your conversations and how they fill their tanks, fill their buckets. You have to approach that very differently with all of them. So how do you know what their element is? Like, let's start there. How do you learn what their element is?
And this is obviously a really unusual way to talk about parenting with element types, but
Mm-hmm.
there is a quiz that you take to figure out what your child's element type is. It's on my website. If you do any look at all into traditional Chinese medicine, and again, this is way kind of over here, but
Mm-hmm.
I have found that it works wonderfully. You find out there's a quiz to figure out which element type your child falls under, and you start with that. And then you take it to, well, okay, so what am I going to do with this information? How am I going to interact with my child and give them what they need,
Mm-hmm.
based on that? Because
Okay.
it tells you what they need.
Right.
That water child did not need to be out partying. She needed to feel comfortable and safe and secure being at home.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I can, Julie, maybe after we're done recording, I can get that link and I'll put that in the show notes for anybody that's interested in taking that. And, it's okay if it's, like you're saying, it's out there, it's a different way of approaching this, because I think sometimes that's what we really want as parents, is just this, more tangible advice, something that we can hold on to. And maybe this is just my opinion, but I would rather take something that's been used for thousands of years versus something that's only been used for 100 years.
I
Like,
agree.
I mean, I would rather open up to that, because so what we've been conditioned, myself included, and probably almost everybody that listens to this podcast, we are conditioned in this Western world, right? That's our
Mhm.
paradigm. That's all we know. So, and that's all our parents knew. So that's how it's been, handed down to us. But if we can go back to thousands of years ago and how it's been approached all this whole other time, I think there's a lot of wisdom and knowledge in there that we are missing as parents. And that's kind of what I'm
Yeah.
hearing you explain, is that it's this missing piece, but it exists. It's just something that has been practiced before this, paradigm. And if people don't understand what a paradigm is, it's like what our reality is, right? What our social conditioning is. This existed before our current social conditioning. So
That's very well put, Amy. Very well said.
yeah. So okay, let me think about where I want to go from here, because there's holistic parenting is very new it's probably a very new concept for a lot of my listeners. And I want to make sure we unpack that enough for people to
Okay.
really grasp and hold on to. So, we talked about the elements, and you gave us this beautiful example of how you applied it in a coaching setting. So let's talk about how we approach this when you have multiple children, because like I was saying, this can get very overwhelming. And it seems like we still have this to-do list that needs to get
Yeah.
done,
Yeah.
but now it almost feels like we have another thing to add to it. So what are your thoughts on that? How do we apply that?
It's a very good point. And I've given talks to teachers to try to explain this to teachers. And they say, yeah, this is all great, but I've got a classroom full of kids. And so they
Right.
can't always apply it. So what you say is absolutely right. And those to-do boxes do need to get done, maybe not as quickly and efficiently as we all expect of ourselves to do. But really, it just takes an awareness of, I'm just thinking about how I was with my boys. It really just takes an awareness, even if you can't always give them exactly what they need, which you can't, especially if you have more than one child, but to be aware. For instance, my middle child is a fire child, and he needed attention. He liked to be the center of attention. That's what a fire child is. And they do great when they have all kinds of attention and people paying attention to them. And then my oldest child was not at all, was very different, didn't want attention. So I was aware that, okay, Corbett, the middle one, when he asks for attention, I'm going to try to give him attention, and I can let the older one do whatever he's going to do. And the older one needed other things. He's metal. He needed rules and regulations. He needed to know what the expectations were. So I knew what he needed. So just to be aware of what they need and you don't have to always deliver, but if you're aware of it, then that helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do the teachers say? How do you apply this to the teachers in their classrooms?
I really couldn't help them with that.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
say,
Yeah.
because I think that it's nice for teachers to be aware, and maybe they already are. But no, I think it's important for them just to be aware of what each child, and depending on what the educational situation is, whether it's a small class or a big class. Small classes, it would be possible, whether it's Montessori or a private school or something like that, they could incorporate, just all it takes is doing the element quiz test and find out what the element is. And that is a big guide in what a child needs. So I don't have an answer for the teachers.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I can imagine that would be really tough, especially where they have the constraints. Like they do have specific constraints, and they do have very specific times, and they don't have as much freedom. We homeschool, which a lot of my listeners know. So that's, pros and cons of both. We choose our heart, and that's what we choose. It's beautiful and it's tough, and we love it, and I hate it. And I mean, it's all of the things. I shouldn't say I hate it, but I love it, and I get very frustrated all in the same moment. But I still would choose that over our traditional public school option. We don't have a Montessori private school option where we are. So, and I guess maybe some of my questions come from personal standpoints too. Like, well, how do I apply this in my life? Because I feel like a lot of my listeners, I don't want to say everybody's like me, because that's very narcissistic sounding, but a lot of stay-at-home moms are also homeschooling, or, kind of questioning this educational side of their kids. So even if they're in public school, it's still like, well, how are you learning? What are they doing in school to, incorporate your personality, your individuality, and how you learn? So I'm always just kind of curious about it a little.
Yeah. And I'd like to actually talk a little bit more about that, because I had somebody on my show who was, she homeschooled, she traditionally schooled, and she works at Montessori. So she had all, but the bottom line is that, and she agrees that, and Montessori does this, the bottom line is that you not catered to, but you want to foster the child's strengths. And like I say, if they learn better through numbers, it's the individual child, no matter what you're teaching them, how you're teaching them, it's the individual child that is what's important. It's not the educational agenda. It's not the educational program necessarily, but it's how each child, just how they work. And again, it's not, when you say how they learn, that's what stumbled me. But if you just take a look at the child and see how they interact with the world, how they are with people, that's a big step in educating them in a way that works for them.
Yeah. And that comes back full circle to that awareness. If you can just be aware of the type of child they are and their personality, and we say personality, but really, in terms of this holistic parenting, it's element, that is kind of the basis for their personality. So can
I also like to say, sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
To get element type is yes. And that's, that is what I say, but I also translate the element type into what their true nature is, what their inner essence is. It's who they are at the core. So we can find out what that is by labeling it under an element, but it's just really who they are at the core, their inner essence. I think the inner essence is a good translation from element type to what it is.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that a little bit. So one of the things that I want to talk about is this idea of Western medicine versus Eastern medicine, and then now how we're blending that. We've already touched on it a little bit, but I want to dive a little bit deeper. So, and how you use that in your approach with parents and families. And, we talked about your past and your previous, or your work as a pediatric nurse practitioner. And so how are you using that in relation to what you've learned with Eastern medicine in your coaching and in working with parents? And I guess my other side of that question is, are you working with the parents, or are you working with the kids, or is it a whole
Yeah.
family approach?
No, I work with the parents.
Okay.
Because it's the parents who are at home with a child and doing what, I mean, I will work with kids, but I don't work directly. I won't say that I won't do it, but my focus is on the parents or the parents with the child.
Okay.
And the blending of it is, we all know Western medicine really, really well. And so really it's more about bringing the Eastern medicine into our lives, or into our parenting lives, and incorporating the philosophy, the Eastern philosophy, which is a lot kinder and gentler than Western is. And Western, in terms of as a pediatric nurse practitioner, again, Western medicine is a lot about medications, which is fine. And I hesitate because I think that it's fine to a certain degree.
Right.
Interventions, probably more strict boundaries and rules, and this is the way that you have to do it, and this is what you need to do and what you should do. And Eastern is much kinder and gentler, and it's much more, not to sound too it's a go with the flow kind of thing, and you find out what your child needs and you go with their flow. And Western medicine is less like that. So I just use Western medicine. I'm aware. I mean, we're all aware of what Western medicine is about. I was into Western medicine for years and years. And so that's, like you say, it's our paradigm. That's what we've been indoctrinated into. And so my goal is to bring a little more Eastern, kinder, gentler stuff into what we're already doing.
So how does that look? Can you give me an example of what a Western approach would be versus a holistic approach? Like maybe this is maybe not the best way to approach that, and this is what, in your opinion, like this is a better way to approach this parenting situation.
What I can't really get out of my mind, I'm going to talk about this, and it may not be the best example. And in fact, but again, it's one of my kids who is a fire type, which means that he's energetic. He likes attention. He was not very interested in school because he was much more social, and that was his strength. That makes me think of another example, was the sociability. And so the school, which was a private school, but they didn't have room for anybody who would not sit still and pay attention. So they said, well, get him tested for ADHD. And he was very borderline ADHD. It was not hard and fast ADHD. And I opted not to put him on medications because I thought that it would cover up his, and this is even before I knew about element type, but I felt like it would cover up his essence, who he was, what made him who he was. And I loved his sociability, and I didn't like getting called into school all the time saying, well, he's had a problem with this, a problem with that.
Right.
So he was, I guess, ADHD. But anyways, I said, I'm not putting him on medications. He's got a developing, growing mind. I don't want to put medications into that. And so he went through school that way. And he did fine. He's got a really very smart brain. And I actually did an episode with him to talk about his ADHD. So eventually, when he became an adult, he put himself on medication, and he says, wow, what a difference. What a difference that's made. And he said, but very nicely, he says, Mom, I understand why you didn't want to give me medications when I had a young brain, but it made a big difference. So that's not the best example because, but it's what I did. I went with what I did not want to cover up with medication, his true nature, his buoyancy and sociability and humor and all that stuff that made him him. Whether that was the right decision or not, I still don't know. It was for the time.
Yeah.
Another child who I have worked with who also is fire type, and he is again very social. People, he had at the golf course, he would sell used golf balls and lemonade. And he was very sociable. They're charismatic. The fire type are they're charismatic. People just love fire types because they're just so engaging and fun. And so this kid had an entrepreneurial kind of sense to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he got all kinds of business. People were coming over to buy his lemonade, not because his lemonade was all that good, but not because used golf balls were good, but they were just engaged with him. And he went on through school. He didn't suffer. He struggled through school. It was not his area of expertise at all. His parents saw that and they encouraged his entrepreneurialness. And he became really successful as a business person. He went to college, a average college, and he graduated averagely, but he did really, really well when he got out business-wise because people came to him because of his personality. And yes, he knew numbers. He did have an interest in numbers in the stock market and that kind of stuff. And obviously that has a lot to do with it. But his parents helped him capitalize on his fire nature and his entrepreneurial skills. Mm-hmm. So that was the other one I was thinking of.
I love that. So one of the things that I was thinking of when you were giving those examples is I can't help but think the biggest struggles that you face, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just assuming here. So hopefully it's not, what they say about people that assume. But what I'm assuming is that your struggles come when your child's element or their inner essence is the opposite or different than yours. Because I just imagine if your child is maybe a little more similar to you, you have a little more understanding of what they need because you both know what each other needs. But maybe I'm wrong. So I guess maybe that's my question. Do you see in your practice and in your coaching issues come up when they are opposite elements or different elements?
Yes, and it's very worthwhile if anyone takes a quiz to have everybody in the household take a quiz, all of the kids and all of the parents, because in fact, certain essence element types can complement each other quite well. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I know of two fire, a mother fire and a daughter fire, and they're always going because they both want to be the attention. They both want to, the blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
And so that doesn't work well. So sometimes they complement each other. And again, it really is just being aware. My kids, I have a certain type. I'm an earth type, and one of my kids is an earth type. And so, yes, I understand where they're coming from better than if I wasn't an earth type. That does help. Right. But it's not, it doesn't make or break a parenting relationship or style or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I'm really curious now what my daughters are. Is there an age? So Lily, my youngest, is 2.5. So is there an age that we start to see what their inner essence is, or is there an age that's too young? I'm not sure I'm not asking that in the right way. What age do we start to dive into that? Because they start to get their little personalities around between 2 and 3 is what it seems like to me as a parent.
Yes. Yep. I agree. And I would say that I'm not sure that I've done a quiz or a element assessment on a 2 or a 3-year-old, but I think that it would be worth doing. Mm-hmm. The older they get, the harder it gets, the less true it is. So that the younger the child is, I really believe the closer they are to who they are, the closer they are to their heart, the closer they are to where they came from. They're more themselves the younger that they are. Mm-hmm. And when you turn into a 9 or a 10-year-old and you're getting influences from the outside world, you're losing a little bit, or this is getting covered up, I think, by other influences and other people. Yeah. So I think the sweet spot is probably 4 to 6. 4 to 7 is when you really will see what their element type is. But 2 or 3, absolutely, I think that it's worth a try. I've never done it, but I think that it's definitely worth looking at. Mm-hmm. And you might say, oh yeah, then it's obvious. Great, then you're 2 years ahead of the game.
Yeah. So is there a point where you feel like this sounds really terrible, but do you think that there's a point where it's too late to apply the holistic parenting approach? Or what if people maybe they have some older kids or they're teenagers and they've never really done this before, but they want to try and dive into it. What are your thoughts on that?
It's absolutely worth it. Again, with teenagers.
Yeah.
By teenagers, we've lost a lot of our influence on our kids. The earlier you start, by far the better. But all is not lost when they're teenagers, not by any means, and especially if a parent is looking for and open to another way of approaching their teenager. But the teenage years the teenager is kind of shaped into the teenager that they are based on what happened during those first 8-10 years. So it's not too late, but not by any means, but it pays handsomely to address it earlier on.
Do you think that some of this is because some of the issues that we're having with anxiety and what we were talking about earlier with what we're seeing in our children, do you think that's because we as parents don't know who we are? Do you think that there's an element of that going on?
Yes. To make holistic parenting work best is definitely helpful to know who we are, where we're coming from, why do we do what we do? Is it from our parents? Is the way that we're programmed? We're all programmed from how we were brought up, and it's very natural to parent the way that we were parented. But it's really helpful to do your own element type and find out what really motivates you and what stresses you. But I think a lot of what comes where kids' anxiety is coming from, and this I get into a bit in my book, which we can maybe talk about later, is that there are huge pressures on kids from parents, from schools, from society, to be a certain way, to look a certain way, to get certain grades, to go to a certain college, to have a certain profession, to drive a certain, there are all these pressures of external validation, which really is not the right way to go. You really want your validation and your self-worth to come from within. And so all the friends on Facebook maybe makes you think that you're popular, but if you don't feel like you're a popular person, it's not even popularity, but if you don't feel it in here, then all this external stuff just it's fleeting like the wind. You may have a bunch of Facebook friends one day and not the next day, and you may be a great athlete one day and you're getting all of your self-worth and your validation from the great soccer player that you are, and then you break a leg, and then where are you? So anyways, the point is that I think that if we can help a child to feel really good from within, which starts from the very beginning, feel good from within, then they're in a better position to be able to face all of the pressures and all of the anxieties that life throws at them as they get older.
One of the things that I was thinking about as you were explaining that is that as a stay-at-home mom, we have this incredibly amazing opportunity to do this, to model this for our children, because one of the biggest struggles that I see with women as full-time moms is a lack of value and self-worth. And then they have this huge monumental breakthrough where they realize, I don't need the job title. I don't need the paycheck. I don't need the brand new car. I don't need all of these materialistic things that social, society tells us we need to find self-worth and to define us as individuals. Once you realize that, and I mean, I fully believe it puts you in this incredible position to just break free of all of that. And it allows women to blossom, stay-at-home moms to blossom, and then model that to their children, because as a full-time mom, you don't have anything. A lot of the times you don't have those pieces of identity to lean on, to hold on to and grasp onto. So your self-worth and your fulfillment and your value within life comes from within. It has to come from within. And that's everything we're doing on the podcast is about building women up, building these moms up to understand their self-worth. And maybe some of that comes, like what you said, from knowing your element and knowing who you are, accepting who you are, I guess, too, and then from there, starting to love yourself as you are and understand yourself. But and maybe this is my biased opinion as a full-time mom, but we're in this amazing position to do that and then model that for our children, because I don't know a lot of stay-at-home moms that drive the brand new car. I mean, if they do, that's great. I am not trying to,
Right.
say that that's a bad thing by any means, but I just know as a family with a single income, more often than not, you don't have all of the other things that
Right.
accompany that role.
Yep. Yep. And your podcast and what you do, Amy, is a perfect example of, yes, validation from within, but also the value to our future generation is just immeasurable for what you are promoting, for helping stay-at-home moms feel good about what they do, which they should. I think I've said to you that is the most important job in the world, and it's not given enough. I don't think it's given enough credence and enough importance. But it's what's more important than what our kids are going to turn into?
Yes.
And yes, we have, or all moms, but
Mhm.
certainly stay-at-home moms have this, I don't like to use the word power, but this power to influence. And it's not, I don't mean influence in a bad way, or not direct and make this happen, make that happen, but to be positive influence to our children, to do positive to the world when they grow up.
Yes. And I mean, we've heard it time and time again, change starts within your home, and as a full-time mom, you're taking on that responsibility. You're essentially the main changer. Like, you're the game changer. You have the power, like you said, to be the game changer. And I think, this conversation that we're having today around holistic parenting is just adding to the repertoire of knowledge that we can have to help us, be better prepared for this role that we've taken on, and to better understand ourselves and then take that into better understanding our children. So let's talk about your book a little bit. A Parenting Revolution for Higher Evolution: Raising Resilient, Responsible, Compassionate Kids from the Inside Out. I want to dive into a little bit about the book and why you wanted to write this book and how it came to be. And then maybe if you want to just touch on a little bit of kind of what it's about, because I'm all about like tools and like takeaways and what can people buy. And I know it's not out yet. We're not going to be able to dive too much into it today because it hasn't been released, and I'm a little upset just personally that I can't read it before I have this conversation with you. But maybe after it's released, we can, I can have you back on and we can dive into it a little bit deeper. But can you share with us this passion project that you've had and is now coming to fruition?
Yeah, and it's really based around really what we've been talking about, what I talk about on my podcast, and honoring each child individually for who they are individually, and to help grow. So raising resilient, responsible, compassionate kids from the inside out means that you need to get this inside strong. You don't need you get the inside strong where they feel strong, they feel confident in themselves, they get positive validation from you as a parent, and it builds up their inner essence, what is driving them, what makes them who they are, and feel good about that. And you build it up strong enough, and nobody's gonna make it unshakable, so that they can stand true and strong. So I just think that it does the world a favor if we can have a new generation of kids who feel really solid on the inside. So from the inside out, and if you build up the inside and strengthen their inner essence, their soul, their core, their heart, whatever you want to call it, the outside just naturally flourishes. Again, from Chinese medicine, when you treat a medical problem, you treat the root cause. You go inside, you find out what the root cause is. For instance, a fever is a sign that there's an infection going on down deep, and you can treat the fever, but the infection isn't going to go away. You need to treat the infection. So it's getting to the root cause, the inside, and then the outside will be fine if you get to the root. The roots. I'm sort of mixing in another topic also, which is about behavior. And when we talk about behavior, which is another reason that I wrote this book is about behavior, is comes from something inside that isn't working for them. It's a stressor. that you find out what they are from their element type. They're stressed out and they will lash out with behavior. You get to why that behavior, you don't just say, don't yell and punish them for yelling the behavior. No, you figure out why they're yelling and you get to the root cause of where the yelling is coming from. And then you're in a much better position to help them figure out how to handle what's causing them to yell.
I love that. I love that you touched on behavior, because I feel like that's one of the first things for us as parents to be like beating our heads against the wall. Like, I don't understand why you're screaming, or I don't understand why you just flipped your shit over something so small. And if we can understand where that's coming from, that's so powerful. I feel like that's a mom's superpower to be like,
it is.
No, yep. I understand why you just had this, this lash out moment, or I understand why you just screamed at your sister. I say sister because I have daughters, or brother, whatever. So I love that you touched on that. And then that the book also touches on behavior and ways that we can handle some of these issues that we're having with our children. So can we apply this type of parenting? Like I was saying before, I asked about the elements for the younger children, 2.5, 3, but can we start applying this type of parenting to them even before we fully understand their inner essence and their personality?
Yeah. And this, I don't think this is too theoretical. I think that it's practical as well, is that it's connecting with them. And especially the younger kids that can't, a lot of kids can't say a lot of people can't say express what they're feeling and what they're thinking. And certainly little right. kids, pre-verbal kids obviously can't express themselves, or just barely getting to be verbal kids can only just barely express themselves. But so therefore we need to be able to connect with them and just try to understand where they are coming from. Figuring out what happened, a cause and effect, what happened to bring out this behavior. And another thing I'll say about behavior is that I believe that behavior comes from an inner fear and anxiety. Kids don't wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm going to misbehave today, or I'm going to piss off mom by doing this. It's a reaction to something. And that's our job, is to figure out what that something is in the environment that causes them to feel unsafe or insecure or afraid, or any of those negative emotions that will cause them to behave in whatever way is their typical way of behaving. And so that's not a really concrete way of saying how to connect with your kids and figure out what's driving it. But the connection and trying to understand what that influence, that factor was out here that caused them to react.
I think that's really interesting. So I will just kind of use a little bit of a personal example. It is a personal example of something that we went through even just this morning with my oldest daughter. She was lashing out, kind of had some behavioral issues this morning, and we've really worked to, and I'm going to say that we've worked, but I'm not going to say that we're perfect at it by any means, because we're still learning this emotional development and trying to use other words other than I feel bad, I feel good, In fact, what I'm going to do, and when I do this, I will send a copy for people to download, but I want to put up a list on the fridge of other descriptive words, other words that they can use other than good or bad. Like, okay, let's go through the list. How are you feeling? Let's choose one. And so it's on the fridge, and it's something that I can use and the kids can use. But one of the things that Gracie worked through today, when I had this open conversation with her, like, okay, well, what's going on? And, we just kind of dove into it, is I figured out that she was jealous. She was feeling jealous, and she was able to articulate that, which I was so proud of her. She's 7, almost 8, that she was able to articulate the fact that she felt jealous of her sister because her birthday party was yesterday and she got gifts today that she didn't get. Yeah. And so she was unwilling to eat her breakfast, unwilling to sit at the counter, is usually a very, I want to say, compliant type child, will she aims to please. So she will do as she's told most of the time. And she, had pushed her bowl across the counter, wasn't interested in breakfast, said, I don't want to eat this. And that's not typical of her. And I wasn't there for it, but she had explained to me what had happened. And then she was able to, just with us having this conversation, articulate the fact that, well, she was jealous of Olivia. And I was like, okay, I didn't exactly know where to go from there, other than the fact that I just told her, I understand.
Yep.
And jealousy is a normal feeling. And what happens, this was just my parenting approach. And you can step in at any point and tell me maybe what I could have done differently. But I just said jealousy is a normal, natural feeling and it happens. And the problem lies when you act on the jealousy and you do something out of jealousy. But if you have that feeling, at least you recognize that feeling and you understand it. But what the problem was is when you pushed your bowl away and you were unkind to your dad, and then you got into Olivia's presence and you acted on that jealousy because of that feeling you had. I didn't really have a best approach for her to come away from and say, this is what you should have done. It was just
No,
more like, this is the feeling you had. And the problem is that you acted on it.
that's beautiful. That is perfect.
I don't
And
know if I did it right.
oh, absolutely. And one jealous situation may not apply to the next jealous situation. So I don't think there's anything that you're supposed to say that she should have done. The fact that you sat and listened to her, the fact that she said, wow, mom understands where I'm coming from. And you helped her enunciate where she's coming from and what the emotion was. So the fact that you took the time to pay attention and listen to her and give her some feedback, that's really all that mattered. Whatever you said about jealousy, which was completely appropriate and right, almost didn't matter. Just the fact that you were listening to her and understood that there was something not right inside and it was causing her to act this way. And so for her to be able to be acknowledged that was what happened is huge. That's huge.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't sure, what I was doing as I was working through it with her, other than I know that I want to be listened to sometimes, like I want to be heard, even if you don't have a solution. My husband not always, a lot of times he wants to be the fixer. Like, here's, what can I do to fix it? I'm like, I don't need it fixed. I just need to be heard. I just need to be listened to. And I just imagine that my daughters want the same. Like, I can listen to, and I'm going to be really honest, Julie, and say that I don't always do that. I mean, but I try. And I think the realistic approach to this is that moms aren't always going to get it right all the time. There are so many more times that I have not got it right. And then I look back and I say, oh, and even with this, I'll probably say, oh, if I would have maybe done Julie's approach, or if I would have, now that we know better, maybe we can do better next time. We just use it as a learning curve,
And we
opportunity.
Yeah. And parents you can't be expected to have all the answers. We'll never have all of the answers. And again, every situation is going to be different, but just listening and connecting and giving them a compassionate listening ear is huge. And then sometimes you and the child figure out what needs to be done or not. Sometimes your intuition tells you what needs to be done, but just the connection and listening and being guided by that is really the best we can do. We're never going to have all of the answers, and we can't beat ourselves up about it. Do no harm. I put that in my book. But first thing is just to do no harm. Don't belittle them. Don't hit them, or don't be harmful to them. If we could all just do no harm.
Yeah.
What's the word that I'm trying to think of? I'm saying belittling. Humiliating. Yeah, that's terrible. And it happens, we don't even know, or labeling, saying, we tell our kids things all the time and we think that it's not much of anything, but it is. So if we can just be nice. Yes. It sounds so ridiculous. Cut that part out. Just do no harm.
Yeah. No, I agree. If we can just kind of approach it in that way, and then I really believe, and I've talked about this on the podcast too, if you approach it in that way and you don't hit it, it's okay to apologize. And it's okay to say, you know what, I did not handle that situation that you were trying to talk to me about in the best way. Can we try it again? Or I'm sorry that I lost my temper. Or, it's okay to apologize and for them to know that you that you didn't get it right that time. And maybe next
Yep.
time you can try and better understand and try and get it right. And one of the things that I'm learning as a parent, and this is what we've already kind of touched on and talked about, but as a mother, I want to be, this is what I said Brad does to me, is I want to be the fixer,
Yeah.
I want to fix all the problems and have all the answers for you. And one of the things that I'm learning as a mother is that they may seek the answer from us. Gracie always really wants me to give her the answer. Well, what should I have done? How do I handle this? And I don't have the answer for her all the time. And that's okay,
Yeah.
because they have to figure that out for themselves. But if we can bring awareness to who they are, like you said, I'm bringing this back full circle, but if we can bring awareness to them to understand who they are at their essence, then they can make these decisions for themselves better. We can better equip them to make these decisions independently, and they're going to get it wrong, right?
Yep.
But they have to learn that way. And I feel like my parenting approach is I don't want to give them the answer and how to handle the situation next time. We talk about it. What do
Yep.
you think you could have done next time? Okay, well then let's try this next time. I mean, it doesn't go this articulately beautiful
Right.
as I'm
Right.
explaining it to you, because I'm talking to another adult. But
Yep.
when I'm talking to Gracie or Olivia, I don't want to tell them how to behave. I don't want to tell them how to deal with conflict and how to deal with these problems and how to act, because they know themselves better than I do. They know the scenario in that moment better than I will ever know it when they start reflecting back and talking to me about it. And I want to equip them with the tools and the confidence to handle these situations on their own. That's what builds them up as humans to go into the community and bring their diverse individualities to that community and better that community by making healthy, positive choices. I mean, that's my goal. I don't know if I'm going to
Yep.
get to it, but
You are right on.
if I tell them, well, this is how you should have spoken to your sister, this is how you should have handled this situation, it may not, it's not going to teach them through trial and error how to handle it next time.
Right.
So
And it may not work for them either. There's different
exactly.
solutions for different people. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm big into experience is the best teacher. And I think that you're right. We're there to guide them and sort of
Mhm.
give them our adults. We do have more wisdom than they do, and that helps them to
Mhm.
impart some of that wisdom. But really, we're there just to guide them, not to tell them or direct them or say, this is what you have to do.
Mhm. Yeah, because like you said, you gave the example earlier of the bully, the children, the 3 different approaches with the bully. And I think that's really great because none of them are necessarily wrong. I mean, if
Right.
there's a bully, I'm not going to tell my daughters, and they're pushing her, I'm not going to tell them not to push them back. I'm going to tell them to protect themselves. I mean, I'm not like, so none of those approaches are wrong, but it's going to depend on each of their personalities. Like maybe one of them can use humor to diffuse the situation. Maybe one of them is going to need to put her dukes up and sock them a good one.
Yep.
Maybe the other one is going to run away. Like it what works for me and what I tell them may not work for their own individual personalities and who they are. So I think that is a really good example of a very realistic thing that could happen to children, especially,
Yeah.
and how they have to better equip themselves and know themselves in order to face that situation. So,
Yeah.
Julie, thank you so much for this conversation today. I really appreciate it. This idea of holistic parenting, I think, is something that people are probably doing on their own and they don't necessarily realize it. But my
Yeah.
hope from this is that people can lean into it a little bit more. And if you can put a name to it, if you can put a title on it, if you can put even a feeling behind it, I feel like that better equips us to make these decisions, or not the decisions, but these approaches that we can take as parents. And
Yeah.
then with your book coming out too, can you talk to us when that is going to be coming out, when it will be released?
Yes, it's coming out on February 24th, which is just a
Okay.
couple of weeks away. It'll be on Amazon,
Okay.
and you can pre-order the ebook now.
Mhm.
Yes, you can.
Mhm.
But you won't get the ebook until the 24th, or the hard, it's not hardcover, but the hard copy is available on the 24th too. So you can go to Amazon to look for it. You can go to my website. It's on there. So yeah, February 24th. it's a pretty cool book. I'm really excited about it.
That's really exciting. So now we have something that people can take away as a tangible resource. And I'm really excited about that. So Julie, is there anything that we didn't cover today that you want to leave listeners with?
No, I think that this is a great conversation. We covered a lot. And I think that the bottom line is that mothers need to know that they are doing the best that they can, and that, you don't always have all the right answers, and you just have to try to feel in and trust yourself, trust your intuition. And because it's such an important job. And I just think that moms, not especially stay-at-home moms, all moms need to feel really good about their job as moms. Don't get too down on yourself. Don't harp on the difficulties that you're having, but try to enjoy it and enjoy your kids, because you only go through this once. I know, because my kids, I'm on the other side now. You only go through it once. It's not a dress rehearsal, and you want to try to enjoy it as much as you can too.
Yes. Thank you so much for those words of encouragement too, Julie. I appreciate that, especially as a mom myself, and just hearing your support as a mom who's been through it and has come out on the other side with all these amazing lessons and life experiences, and just knowing that, there are other women out there that support us too and understand and get what we're trying to do here. And especially within this community. I really appreciate your words earlier about this community and what I'm trying to do here. I forgot to say thank you for that too. So
You're doing good work, Amy. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you so much, Julie. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, sweet mama. Thank you so much for joining Julie and I in this conversational journey regarding holistic parenting and an approach to holistic parenting. I hope you found value in today's episode. I hope it gave you some sense of empowerment and this confidence to help you go into your role as a mother with a better understanding of your child, of yourself, and a little bit of work that we can do to approach these various conversations with our children. So if you found value in today's episode with Julie and I, please give us a like and a share. Don't forget to check out the show notes below to contact Julie if you have additional questions, if you're interested in her coaching program, and be sure to keep an eye out for her book coming out in February 24th. I'll put a link to all of her contact information in the show notes below. And I just really appreciate you listening today. Again, please, it's not enough for you to just listen to this information. If you found value in it, take this information and apply it in your household. Apply it today. Don't wait till tomorrow. Start today. Take action steps today. So thank you so much for listening today. I look forward to talking to you all again very soon.